Well, if you've tuned in here, I'm going to say I didn't expect any kind of response that I had to this little video that I made, really just for myself to kind of give an idea of really just a record of what I was doing and how much fun I've had with flight. And then all these comments started coming forth about this and that and mechanics and that. And I thought, there's so much background that nobody knows about. So I thought, let me at least give you guys a little bit of background. I'll try to be brief. That first video was long. Even as I watched it, I was like, oh gosh, I think at one point we were just watching a tire. And I'm like, an old dry rotted tire, why are we looking at that? So we're going to try to be brief, a little bit more to the point, and maybe make some shorter versions. So yeah, this is my switch and bait right here. This is clearly not a Mooney. The guys that have been flying for a long time know very well what this is. This is my hangar mate's little Cub, and it's a really cool, great looking little airplane. And I had the fortune to fly in one of these with somebody who was training me down in Florida, and I really appreciate him doing that. And anyhow, I'm going to show you why I really came here to show you about, and I'm going to floppy the screen if I can figure out. Let's see, I think I do that. Nope, guess what? That wasn't it. This is why I'm not a videographer. So we're going to try to walk in here. Ooh, bright light. And walk over here because this is what I wanted to show you about. It's a little bit about the history of why and how I got to be where I am with this Mooney. And it has everything to do with this. This is my little m-sqaured. It's a Breeze 2, and it's a 2015. And I had an earlier one of the early models with a two-stroke, and I always wanted to upgrade it. So I'm going to show you some pictures of the first one that I purchased from an A&P up in near Louisville. Mark Petrell, super nice guy, helped me out with all sorts of stuff, and he's been throughout it all a little bit of a support, which I appreciate. By the way, it's like 100 degrees in here. It's really, really hot. So this is the airplane that I own and can't fly yet. And it's a perfect little airplane. It has 120 or 18 hours on it, I think. I've got all the logs and the books for it. And I've had a hard time finding people to fly with me and to train me in this. And that was initially my thought. Like, oh, you want to get into flight. You just kind of want to go around the patch. You want to have some fun, maybe on floats. And anyway, here's how that worked out. I got this airplane. It's my second m-sqaured. The first one I bought complete and flying very nicely, but I took it down to the factory, m-sqaured factory in at St. Elmo. And Paul Mather, the owner and proprietor and the developer of these airplanes, helped me make some adjustments, and we had some fun with it. And I really appreciate Paul training me, showing me some of the ins and outs, and helping me to understand the basics of some of these cool little light sport aircraft. Anyhow, I have this one, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because, well, flight changed for me. It went from what was initially just going to be like, hey, I'm going to fly around the patch and have a little fun. And then as I was training over the city of Memphis, and the bridge was broken, and I realized, it'd take me like an hour and a half to get across that bridge or to get to where we just flew in like 5 minutes. And it was at that point that it sort of was, and this sounds really silly, but like an aha moment. Like, flight can be distance, and it should be, and that's why we fly generally. So it really kind of shifted for me what was just going to be fun around the patch, a good little time, in something like this. And by the way, this thing can go. It does like 75 miles an hour. It has a stall of like 38, and maybe less even. You'd have to check my numbers on that. But the reality is flight shifted for me to general aviation from what was experimental and light sport. But if you haven't tried this experimental light sport category, especially if you're maybe older, you're out of annual, your plane's out of annual, maybe you want to look at something like this because it's a great way to get you flying around the patch and having a really good time with just your driver's license. And obviously, you still have to have a sport pilot certificate, so or something greater than that. So this is it. It is for sale, and the reason I'm selling it is to actually help me fund the Mooney. I need loony Mooney money. So this thing has a 912 ULS. It's 100 horsepower, and I think the whole thing weighs like 628 pounds. It'll go. I mean, the takeoff roll is like, I don't know, like 175 feet. It's almost like, wow, a little, maybe too much almost. When you're used to general aviation, you can we go down the runway, and finally the thing takes off. Now this is not. You nail the throttle and hold on, and you're in the air. It is a ton of fun, but it has. Well, I'm going to see if I can do this. It's got 3 of the windy makers instead of 2. See, there's 3 of them, which means it's really good. Anyway, I'm joking around, but it's a cool little airplane, and it's just not where I need to be right now, and that's why it's for sale. So we're going to leave this little airplane. I'll show you some other pictures, and we're going to come back to the Mooney world. But this is part of Mark's Looney Mooney world, and that's why I'm showing it to you. So look, if anybody's looking for something like this is the bomb diggity fun for around the patch, no doubt. But it could help me get my Mooney in the air a lot faster. So I just decided to turn the key and start it up. I do it every week or so, and this thing starts so beautifully and just literally hums. And you can't hardly believe there's a propeller right there behind me running, but it is a running. Anyhow, great little airplane, and it's even got the little blinky lights out there. Blinky lights, well, you might be able to see them over there. Blinky and all that kind of cool stuff. Anyhow, there's that. So here's a picture of the first little m-squaured I purchased, November 35228. And this is where and how I purchased it. And to me, it looked a little goofy with the funny little Rand's nose cone, and it just was all like wackadoo as far as I thought. So I had some plans for it, and cool little airplane nonetheless. So this is how you break down an m-squaured and transport it. You build a box with the wings in it, and you take a lot of carpet and you protect everything, and you just stick the little airplane on top. Worked for me, and got it back safely, and no issues. Just thought I'd share a couple more goofball images of the first airplane and where it was going. And here it is down at the m-squaured factory being deconstructed by myself and getting ready to add and change some things to my liking. The biggest change I wanted to make was to add the little half egg pod that is sort of indicative of all the later model m-squaured stuff. Some of the early planes and some of the really super lightweight planes do not have them, but I thought it would make for better flying. I thought it would make more enjoyable to fly, and I also figured that someone would be willing to fly in it if they weren't battered by the wind. And so that was really, it was about training and finding somebody to train with me. And that's why I put that on there. So here it is really starting to come together and look like a more contemporary m-squaured. And I absolutely love the little helicopter-y feeling instrument panel. I thought it was just kind of cool. It looked great. I think it's from Iran's, and it fit the little airplane really well, and I actually preferred it over the m-squaured version of that. And it was a little bit closer to me and not quite as far away. I'll show you an image with that in it.
All right, new windshield.
And here it is all put together, and me taking my first lesson in it with Paul Mather of m-sqaured. And no, my butt is actually not scraping the pavement, but it is not far from it. If you've never been in one of these little things, it is an absolute blast. The first time I flew with Paul in one, I actually was laughing out loud within the first few seconds of the flight because it was just like a little Manco go-kart with wings. And I was just sort of surprised that it flew so well and had so much fun flying around with it. And I thought, well, I got to have one of these. And that's where that all started. All right, so enough of all the background stuff with the little m-squareds and everything. Here's the real story, and I know it's what you came for, and the last video wasn't really intended to be a cliffhanger, so we're going to jump right into this and get into some real Mooney stuff. Go ahead. You want me to I'm going to leave the fuel pump off. Oh, man. Man, that thing sounds great. Woo! Well, folks, there you go. It was a surprise, sort of, that it ran. What really caught me is how well it ran and how good the engine sounded. We had clearly spun it over by hand with oil in it. I cleaned the injectors. We had cleaned up the lower plugs, done everything that we could to reanimate this thing in proper fashion. The oil was really good, really clean, and because it was so good, I was shocked. I sent it off to have it sampled before we even started this, and it showed as good oil. It came back as great oil. No metal flake or anything in it like that. So rather than change the oil, I decided, well, it looks so good, we're just going to try to start it with this oil in there. I know there might be some comments about that, but it's what we did. You got to remember, this whole airplane, the reason that I bought this airplane is because it was sort of like a salvage value airplane in a field. The purpose of it was to actually go through every system on the airplane and nut and bolt it. I wanted to look at the piston lands, at the rods, the rod bearings, the crank. I wanted to go through all of it. And, I didn't have the money for another Mooney that was maybe 60, 70, 80, $100,000. But I could do it little bit by little bit and nut and bolt the whole airplane and know that when I was done, I had something that I could have confidence in and trust and know that it's something I could trust safely to fly. So that's kind of the idea behind it. If you don't have a whole lot of cash, you might have to do it little bit by little bit.